Welcome once again to Harnessing Your Wealth. I'm Billy Peterson, and we have a fun show lined up today. This is going to be a good one. You're going to want to listen to this entire way through. Today we have Isaac Weishaupt, and Isaac is very well known in his space for bringing out issues of the day that seem to have maybe a bit of a question, a little deeper penetration of what's going on in the world around us. And he studies all these things, and it's specific to Hollywood and celebrities and maybe even things like the Illuminati. So things that we all have maybe a passing interest in, but don't spend enough time to really dissect them. Well, he does all the work for us. He's written 9 books, kind of known Isaac for a while here, and work out together. See him all the time. Ask him to be on the show. Thought this is going to be a fun show. Shaun, what do you think?
I'm excited for it. I have, you hear little bits and pieces about the Illuminati, or you see the symbolism out there. I'm not a big Hollywood celebrity guy, but you can't help but hear those things and see those things. So I'm excited to hear what Isaac has to say today, and just kind of, I don't know, we might get some goosebumps, raise some hairs. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, and it still has a lot to do with our line of work too, because I mean, let's face it, what's going on in the world? There's been a lot of questions these last 4 years, a lot of questions. Is there a higher power, a force at work that we are not aware of, hidden agendas, all these things, and all this, the symbolism, it starts to resonate. It starts to maybe make you wonder. So, Isaac, now I'm bringing you in here. When did you get started in all this stuff and the celebrity issues and hidden symbolisms and all these things that you deal with on a regular basis?
Yeah, this is a great start, guys. And in fact, thank you for having me on your show. I actually listened to your show, and I thought that you had an episode about celebrity finance,
money mistakes. Yeah,
money mistakes. Yeah. And I really dug that one. I grew up near Philly, so I knew who Lenny Dykstra was and all that. So anyway, but yeah. So for me, it's been a very strange journey, and it goes back to, I was born, I was basically raised in the 80s and 90s, so I grew up on 80s 90s pop culture, things like shows like the X-Files, and I remember watching the Travis Walton abduction movie called Fire in the Sky, where he gets abducted by a UFO.
Yeah.
And then you throw that into the blender along with a lot of sort of counterculture interests I've always had. My dad was into horror movies, so I just grew up watching just tons of horror movies that I imagine most kids probably wouldn't have watched, maybe. And I just was always interested in counterculture things. So I've always had this sort of interest in it with aliens and things like that, wondering the big questions, of course. And then I remember some formative, what we call red pill moments in the conspiracy biz. Some red pill moments for me were back in 2002. I was in the military, and my buddy, we were talking, and he told me to read this book, Behold a Pale Horse by Bill Cooper. And I had never heard of the guy, whatever, tracked down a copy of it, got it. And he talks about, a variety of things like aliens underneath the Denver airport, and who's running the world, and this whole, recovered documents, and some of the stuff that was in the first printing that I have. There's some literature in there that's questionably anti-Semitic. But if you read what Bill Cooper was saying, he says, look, I'm not doing this. I'm just saying that, there's some people that could be connected to this, that, and the other, but let's look at this document. And then that document was proven to be sort of fraudulent. But anyway, so Bill Cooper was one of the first red pill moments. And then a few years later, a guy I was working with put me on to David Icke. And David Icke took what Bill Cooper was saying and added, at least from my perspective, a lot of spiritual components to it and themes of the occult and hidden symbolism and such. And he's the guy who's famous for talking about how there's shape-shifting lizard people. Well, and that's one of the theories that is very intriguing to me. But so then I had that sort of stage, and then I'd listened to in the 2000s I'd been listening to various figures. Like I think there was a guy named, I think his name was Riley Martin, who said he was in contact with aliens, who was making the rounds on different radio shows and podcasts. And then um, Joe Rogan. I used to listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, watch a lot of Ancient Aliens because he would always have Giorgio Tsoukalos on and talk about these sort of ideas of a ancient culture, ancient past that are hidden from us, and things like this. The Anunnaki and it goes on and on. So I've always had this interest, and then in 2011, I had a little break between graduating with my bachelor's and starting grad school. I had a 2-year break, and I'd been in such a mode of reading, regurgitating, and I found a lot of value in that, going through the education process, that I started a blog just as a way of, I don't know, pursuing my interest in reading about things and sharing them with the people that would check out the blog. That is illuminatiwatcher.com, which I still maintain. And then from there, I started writing. I actually wrote for grad school. I wrote a thesis that was about 120 pages, and I thought, man, I could write a whole book. Like, I just wrote this 120-page document. So I wrote a book synthesizing a lot of these ideas of David Icke and Bill Cooper and all this stuff. And from there, it started gaining traction. I had no intentions of it becoming a thing, and that expands out to podcasting. I started podcasting in 2014, and I didn't even want to do it. There was a reader who said, "Hey man, like, I don't like reading. Like, you gotta do a podcast." And I was like, "I don't want to do a podcast." So I started learning YouTube videos, and I thought, well, it's not that much harder. Let me just do the podcast thing for some people. And I barely maintained it for a while, but I did it. And then, slowly but surely, I started getting canceled off of everything. All these platforms would kick me off. And I always thought it was odd because I speak true to my real character and my real beliefs. I question a lot of the conspiracy movement people because I think a lot of them are grifting. I think a lot of them have political or religious interests they're trying to indoctrinate people with. I also think that on some levels, they're putting on a show, they're acting.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things are fine. No, I'm not trying to condemn people, but for me, that's not my jam. I don't have an interest in saying stuff that I don't believe or feel, or at least I put the caveats all the time that this is a theory. This is what people are saying. I don't necessarily think this is fact. You can, I don't care, but these are kind of the things going around. And I try to condense information that I read, because I read a lot of these occult books about ritual magic and alchemy and a lot of concepts that most people would find very strange or hard to understand. And I try to make it in a way that I try to present it in a way that makes sense. And one way I do that is by serving it up with pop culture references. We've got a variety of movies and television shows or events from celebrity pop culture that happen that we can look at and say, okay, is there an occult or Illuminati kind of tie-in here? And I try to find those connections and present them. And I'm trying to be very very cognizant about the, I'm talking about people. I'm talking about people's lives. I'm not trying to wreck people's lives or put celebrities in danger or make people mad or ruin their day even. And it was always shocking to me because I've been kicked off of just about every platform you could think of. And I see, like, for YouTube, for instance, right? I had up to 75,000 subs in it was about 2017 at this point, I think, and they kicked me off. And some of the people that had been around before me, I'm not trying to start problems, but a guy named Mark Dice, he's a conspiracy theorist. And, I actually like some of his work, but he does a thing that he talks really negatively about celebrities. I'll give you an example. So I got kicked off for making a video on YouTube where I talked about the symbolism in a Taylor Swift music video. I don't remember the name of the video. It was one where it had some kind of symbolism of witchcraft in it, or she talked about witches or something like that. I'm not a Swiftie fan. I don't care. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, it was there, and I thought, let's talk about it. So I talked about it, and of course, I said it in my very pragmatic, some would even say neutered way, because some of the audience, they don't like it that I'm so passive about things. They're like, no, I want you to get her, call her a demon worshiper. And I'm like, I don't really know that, buddy, so I'm not going to do it. Whereas a guy like Mark Dice, he'll sit here and degrade her and call her, a floozy, worse words than that, of course, but he'll say all these mean things about her, mean spirited things, and he's got millions of followers. And it's like, why does this guy get a pass?
Mm.
And when you look at the, they when they kicked me off, they gave me I could see the report. It was actually they actually shut my channel down from the Taylor Swift video, and it said violated community guidelines. I look on it. The complaint was filed by her management company, Big Red Dog Media or something like that. And when you talk to YouTube, there's not a person that can help you. It's always this AI automated response. I say, which guideline? And they're just like, please see the community guidelines. Like he's just like, this is crazy for what? And you never get an answer. So I took this training they gave me and just pressed on and was like, okay, whatever. And then a month or two later, I did just the same thing. An Ariana Grande video came out and I did the same thing. Symbolism analysis. She's talking about energies of the goddess and things like this. And they just shut the channel off completely. And when they shut it off, they send you an email. They say, you've been canceled and you could never come back on YouTube ever again under any other name or nothing.
And I was like, it's so weird. I mean, why are they protecting some of these stars like this? I mean, you look at these videos and music videos and even the language they use in these songs and stuff. How is that supposed to be protected? And somebody can't even bring up a fact that there may be something bigger going on.
What I think is, when you go back to when you study a lot of these conspiracies of the occult and such, you'll find there's a lot of connections to paganism, right? You'll find that, you go to Washington, D.C., and you walk around and you don't see crosses and statues of Christ. People say, oh, America's a Christian nation. Like, well, currently it's a nation that's got a lot of Christians, but it wasn't founded that way. It was founded, and you see what's important to the city and the structures is pyramids and Greek gods and Egyptian gods. And, that's what you see all throughout the symbolism of DC. And that's because when you understand how the secret societies work and their philosophies, which, I mean, there's countless books, Manly P. Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages talks about this. It's kind of it's a big, dense book, but Ronald Reagan was really into Manly P. Hall, for example. A lot of our world leaders and a lot of the people who know what's going on behind the scenes, they understand that what they want is to instill an old religion. There's a famous occultist. Her name's Helena Blavatsky. She created the Theosophy movement, which influenced the story of Wizard of Oz and so on. And she had a quote that said, the religion of the future is the religion of the past. Because that's what they want to do, is they want to take us back to a sort of pagan. And when I say pagan, we're talking about worshiping multiple gods. Because back in like the Roman Empire, you would pick and choose which gods you wanted to worship based upon, oh, I want to be rich, and oh, I want to, I don't know, grow good crops, whatever. Mm-hmm. So they would pick and choose. And I think that's what our pop culture system is modeled after, is this idea that there's different gods and goddesses and we must worship them as such. And it makes sense because that must be how these people feel to live that lifestyle of literally anything you want, fame, fortunes. They're treated as modern day gods and goddesses. And we saw the Beatles when they showed up, they showed us, I've heard, and I don't know if this is fact, but I've heard that famous footage of them getting off the plane, they had, all these women passing out and screaming and fainting. I've heard that was mocked up to show people how this is how you act accordingly to your celebrity gods. And whether that was mocked up or not for real, I don't know. But it's sure everyone followed suit, and people are doing crazy stuff for celebrities nowadays. And but I do think that's why you can't poke holes in Taylor Swift. I mean, she's a bazillion-dollar industry, right? And I think that her management company was protecting her image. And for a guy like me who's trying to be rational and point out this and that and the other symbolism, maybe that looks worse for them, for Taylor Swift, than it does coming from a guy like Mark Dice, who's, saying she's a floozy, is all I could think of. Because when Mark Dice says it, like I'm sure the fans, the Swifties, they interact and they engage and they're like, you're a jerk or whatever, but it doesn't change their opinion or their mind. Whereas if I'm saying stuff and they're like, well, wait a minute, that is kind of weird. Why do they all use this symbol? You know?
Do you in any of your studies and stuff you talked about, I'm sure you've run across like the Freemasons, right? And they're, from what I've in my light study of this late at night, Freemasons kind of connect to the Illuminati. And then I made a trip out to Alabama to visit my cousin out there, and she's telling me about this thing called the machine. You ever heard about the machine out in Alabama?
No, what's that? Tell me.
Okay, you might not need to get on this. You guys remember the movie called, I think it was called The Skulls, and it was like about a fraternity.
Yeah.
So that is what is claimed to being going on out in Alabama, and they call it the machine. And once you're in with the machine, you're hooked up. Like, you just happen to get that great job after college. You just happen to have a Ferrari show up in your driveway, like stuff like that. So when you were talking about some of that stuff, it kind of brought it up. Look into that one.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I'll have to dig into that. I've never heard of this, but the symbol that shows up, I assume this is the symbol for it, it's the skull with some keys below it.
Yeah.
And that's and this is very similar to the Yale secret society. That's the same way, a student fraternity, the skull and bones. And the reason why, and the symbolic reason for this skull, you'll find it in Freemasonry. Like they're candidates, they go through initiation processes through a series of rituals. And like, for instance, one of them is they have to sit in what they call the chamber of reflection, where they sit there and there's a skull in there. And similarly, in, I don't remember which degree of initiation, they have to approach death. They have to face death. And like when they wear the blindfold, it symbolizes that they're gone, they're dead, they're dead, like the ego death. And then they unveil the blindfold, and now they see the light. And it's being reborn is the idea, is that you have to face death and be reborn into this occult understanding of reality. And that's kind of one of the big themes I would love to unpack one day. It's too much to summate in, I mean, probably even a full book.
Yeah.
But there's an occult philosophy that it's, and of course it's hard to describe it because it's veiled and it's been hidden and through allegory and symbolism, and it's hard to really make sense of it. But yeah, the skull and bones, they go heavy on the skull symbolism, because it also ties into a lot of ideas about like the death and I'm sorry, not death and rebirth ritual, but there's a thing called Eros and Thanatos, love and death, as the two, these like opposing forces that they use. It gets deep quick, but yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, I think you might find yourself going down a rabbit hole with that, because I've been in that same rabbit hole. With all these, like, the symbolism, and like when I listen to your show, like, we were talking about the Cat Williams thing, and it's like, okay, the guy's saying some crazy things, but it almost like you want to make it make sense, but then your sanity comes back, or just realize, like, well, maybe he is crazy. But why do people not want to believe in conspiracy theories? And to kind of tailor along with that, I think a lot of people woke up in 2020. I mean, through that, with all the things going on. But why do people have a hard time saying, hey, yeah, that might actually be true, or you just get labeled a conspiracy theorist and told
freak,
freak. So what do you see out there?
So this is why I'm happy I'm doing your show. These are great questions, because I do a lot of conspiracy shows, and it's like level 10 red pill talk, and you got to really these are actually the more important questions, I think. I think people don't believe in it because life's easier that way, and I know this from basically living this life for the past 13 years now. People, you get a lot of weird reactions from people when you talk about this stuff. And I didn't realize it because I've always been a really open-minded guy. I've always been trying to absorb, other people's opinions and thoughts, no matter how offensive or crazy they seem. I'm always game to hear it, right? And some people get really upset. I'll give you an example. I was researching the moon landing, and I don't buy 100% into a whole lot of conspiracy theories. Like I see plausibility in most of them, but there's not many that I'd be hard pressed to say, no, that's the crazy one that I'm all in on. And one of them is the moon landing. I don't think we actually put a human being on the moon. I think we've sent stuff there. I think, and I actually wrote about, I have a whole book about this subject that I wrote. And I was talking to some people about it, and there was a guy who wasn't part of the conversation, and he overheard it. And he came over after a couple minutes, and he got in my face. Like, he wanted to fight me. He was really mad.
You take him out?
No, I'm a lover, not a fighter. and that was one of the moments where I thought, man, people really get wrapped up in it. And I don't, the only explanation I could think of, which makes more, because this was pre 2020, right? Pre-pandemic. And the year 2020, I saw a massive increase in listeners and interest in these topics that I've been talking about for so long. And it's the thing that makes me think of is that people lost trust in the institutions that they used to trust fully. And I think this plays into why life's easier if you don't buy into any conspiracies and you just go with the social construct, you go with the flow. And I think that's what the system wants, is for you to just kind of assimilate and fit in. That's what they want, because that's easier to manipulate. It's easier to control, and it's easier for the people who are manipulating to, shore up their resources or whatever it is they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I focus more. I don't get into geopolitics stuff really, or politics at all. I get more into the spiritual aspect, because I think that's the more important aspect. But I do think that when 2020 happened, a lot of people started questioning things they've never questioned before. And, people had almost blind trust in a lot of these organizations and institutions that everyone in my little conspiracy subculture, we question everyone. We question each other. We don't trust each other. The conspiracy people, we eat our own, and it's a sad, unfortunate thing, but that's the way it goes.
That's the way it is.
But I think there's some good that comes out of that whole, 2020 was a nightmare, but to live through. But some good comes out of that, because I don't think you should blindly trust every institution. But I'm also careful, because I also don't think we should burn this all to the ground, because you need traffic lights, and you need police, and you need a government. Like, you need those things on some level. The question is, how do you balance the power so that it's not too oppressive? And like, for instance, I guess the biggest benefit maybe of 2020 is people questioning the mainstream media, because and it's not rocket science. A lot of people know that different mainstream medias will present different biases according to what they want you to think and believe. But I guess most people didn't really understand that.
Right.
So I do think that's good, because I think it's good to take news in from multiple angles, multiple biases, and try to find your own conclusion in a way. We're supposed to be a society of open, free thinkers, not just programmed robots doing what we're told.
Well, you talked about people getting angry, and we never saw that more prevalent than in 2020, 2021. The shaming, the social shaming of you were vaccinated, unvaccinated, weren't following the protocols, right, trying to stand against them, had any kind of maybe opinion that wasn't mainstream or wasn't followed. It's like the tribe is out to get you. Then you get alienated, put in your own corner. They cancel you. We saw a lot, and that's why I think it's a good question, is a lot of eyes were open. And if you weren't opened, I don't know if you were paying very good attention, because so much going on right then that we started to have questions. And it goes back to the movies you kind of addressed, which is why I'm so fascinated in all these topics myself. And I love that you have this show, The Blacklist. I don't know if it's a great Netflix series with all the things going on in government and hidden agendas and cabals. And you start to think, man, is that really happening? I mean, could that stuff happen? And then you go through 2020 and you think, hell yes, that stuff is happening. I guarantee you it's happening. So you start to buy in a little bit more because you start to see that play it out in front of your eyes on these movies. And then like Mission Impossible, I mean, the plots are very interesting and almost like too out there to even believe, but it's, you watch it and then you think, wow, that's crazy. That'll never happen. And then you see what happened and you start going, man, that was a plot in Mission Impossible with all these, the pandemic and how this virus gets spread and how it could be possibly created. I don't know. That's another conspiracy.
Right.
But I love the shirt you have, which says, I need to find more conspiracy theories because all mine came true.
Oh yeah. My father-in-law got that for me. It is how it went. And I think, and it's funny because I forgot to mention on my journey to red pill land here, my health, right? In 2004 or 5, I started reading a lot of books on health and trying to be healthy, right? And that was another, that's another rabbit hole, the health industry, because you're going against some of the stuff you get into goes against the grain of what mainstream sort of medicine would tell you to do.
Yes.
Some of the things. And now, and again, and you're right, like 2020 was the time when things became real, where you really had to make a choice. Like, am I going to take I don't know what words you can say or not say on here, the solution they claimed it was going to help us with with the virus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it became real. And it's like, oh, I got to make this choice for myself now. Mm-hmm. And my whole thing was, even back then, you're right, people started shaming, and I started talking about those things. I actually did 8 episodes researching this exact topic and I wrote a little book about it, and which Amazon blocked, by the way. I couldn't sell it.
Weird.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, it was very much from my personal viewpoint, where I'm not pro or anti. I'm kind of in the middle. Like, some people, maybe it's better for them. Some people don't need it. Like, and that's why it should be personal choice. But I think when they start talking about, look, we're going to make these passports and everyone's got to do it. If you want to interact in society, this thing has to happen. And that's where I'm like, ooh, like that's not good. Like,
you're bringing back flashbacks, man.
Yeah, I'm having PTSD.
I know, it was so awful. Everyone was fighting, and that's what I didn't like about it, is like the shame of whatever side of that you sit on. Like, don't shame the other side, but that's what they were doing, and that is a direct product of a lot of mainstream media stuff and a lot of the institutions not being honest with us and not telling us the truth of the real answer. And this is a parallel to aliens, because that's kind of more my jam, is the alien side of the house. It's got parallels because it's the same thing. It's the institutions coming out and saying, oh yeah, just listen to us, there's no aliens and everything's fine. That's what they've been doing for 80 years. No, that's crazy talk. And then but normal people who are researching this stuff say, man, I don't know, there seems like there's a lot of evidence that says otherwise. And then institutions just say, no, just trust us, everything's fine. And then things flip around one day and they say, well, turns out maybe there is. And it just proves a lot of the theories about a deep state. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, because what you're saying, I would have called you a crazy loon years before the pandemic. You're talking aliens, Isaac. I'm going to shut you down. Now I'm going to listen to you.
Yeah.
Seriously, change my whole mindset. With any kind of thing is possible, and I've grown to distrust the government, if you will, and the institutions and these, you call it the fourth leg of government that kind of came out of nowhere. All these bureaucracies and agencies that aren't elected, by the way, they just came into being. And so now they get power and they're going to do everything they can to keep it and expand it. And so when they control the people, just go back through history, through the thousands of years of civilizations, control the people. And that's what they do. And that's really how these societies stay in existence until they finally don't, until they finally collapse, where the elitists and the high ups finally blow up. And I don't know what that looks like, but I never believed in my whole life. I was pretty sheltered in my thinking that we had things like propaganda and hidden agendas and all these things going on. But
Yeah.
now I do.
Yeah.
Changed
Nate, go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
I need some alien stories before the end of the
Yeah,
show.
we got to
okay?
we got to talk
'Cause
some alien.
I could get into that pretty quick too.
It's such a hot topic right now, and that's and and again going back to 2020, I had written a book called The Dark Path. It's my most popular book. I wrote it in 2017, I think, or 16, and in it I devoted a couple chapters to aliens because you research this stuff long enough, you come across a lot of interesting ideas, and one of them was, I always reference this one because it seems to be the most accurate, was that all signs were pointing to the year 2025 being a revelation of aliens. And you can fill in that blank with whatever you want when I say aliens, entities from another planet, from another dimension, whatever. Because I'm a more of an interdimensional guy. I don't believe that there's green men from Mars that come here. I think it's more interdimensional for a variety of reasons. But I wrote that, and after that I said, I'm going to just write a whole book about aliens because this I didn't devote enough time to it. So I started casually taking notes, and then 2020 hits, and I believe it might have been April of 2020 when the Pentagon came out and confirmed those videos were real that we saw. And look, I don't know the answer. Obviously, I don't. But there's I can either poke holes in the alien argument that we're being presented with, or I can co-opt it. And I'm not sure which way to take that, because on the one hand, I see all of these different organizations that I normally wouldn't trust telling me these things that I've always suspected maybe that was the case. Example, History Channel, I always watch Ancient Aliens, but there's a lot of holes you can poke in Ancient Aliens. There's a whole 4-hour documentary a guy named Christopher White did 10 years ago that you could probably find on YouTube still. I think it's called Ancient Aliens Debunked. And he goes through and he makes it look like it's obviously the people from Ancient Aliens are pushing a lie. For example, the paintings that you'll see, I think Joe Rogan even retweeted this not too long ago, the paintings of the Virgin Mary, and they show what looks to be a UFO in the sky with a light shining from it. And Christopher White pokes big holes in that. It's like, no, if you zoom in on it, you can see it's a choir of angels singing. It's God, And anyway, a lot of History Channel was showing us now they've got all these shows like Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. You have Ancient Aliens, of course.
Skinwalker Ranch is in Utah, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've watched that. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and I do believe there's paranormal activity of some kind, but the question is this just another sort of psychological operation by the deep state or whoever to make us believe in something so that they can take that belief and flip it into something else? Some people call this Project Bluebeam, and the short version is that they want to get ahead of this thing and say, look, we already know what this alien thing is, and then they can take us down the path of what some people claim is the inevitable end, is the one world government, which again, you can go spiritual with it and say it's a Luciferian plan to make us worship the devil, who's the fallen angel who will come to us as the alien god, and it's really Satan. I mean, it's a massive subject. So I started once the Pentagon confirmed those videos that were leaked on the internet were real, I started going into overtime and I wrote 2 books on the subject. And interestingly enough, a lot of those things are lining up to what we're experiencing. We're experiencing what you would say is a sort of weird soft disclosure. We're getting disclosure from TMZ. I just started watching this TMZ video last night on Tubi from Jeremy Corbell. He's a guy he's been on the pulse of UFOs for a long time. He did a great documentary with Bob Lazar years and years ago that really blew my mind. Bob Lazar is the guy who said he worked on reverse engineering UFO technology down at Area 51 back in the 80s. But a lot of these things that have just been in the conspiracy world since, I don't know, 80s, 90s, 2000s, they're starting to seem like maybe there's some truth that could be had there. And the question is, where does that end? How far does that go? How crazy are we going down the rabbit hole here?
You hear Tucker Carlson, he's talking a lot about this stuff. He's on the bandwagon that alien life is here.
Yeah, totally. I think he knows some stuff, and he talked about the Nephilim, right? With Roseanne Barr just a couple weeks ago. And I did a whole show because I actually, Roseanne Barr, she wrote a book. She's from Utah, by the way. She wrote a book years ago, and I read parts of it because she claimed on a talk show recently that she sold her soul to the devil. And I was like, okay, that's right up my alley. Pop culture. Yeah, let's go. So I look it up, and sure enough, this whole book she wrote years ago, she details specifics about how she literally sold her soul to the devil. And it's not a joke. It's in multiple chapters. She has a whole story where she went to this Kabbalistic priest and all kinds of wild stuff.
Wow.
So I did a whole show about it. And as I'm preparing to do that show, the Tucker Carlson interviews her, and there's a clip where they start talking about how the Nephilim are controlling, people or whatever. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Let me toss that on here as a little side note. And then we had this incident at the mall in Miami last week. Have you guys seen this yet?
Right.
Yeah, the mall in Miami, and I don't know. It seems pretty flaky, especially because all the footage I've seen has been the blurriest footage I've ever seen in my whole life of anything. But basically, there was what seemed like hundreds of cops go to this mall because allegedly at the beginning, the story was there was 2 or 4 teenagers fighting with sticks. Then it became 4 teenagers with fireworks. Then it became 50 teenagers with fireworks. Then it became, we thought it was a mass shooting, which is why you see 100 cops out front, which, that makes sense to the rational mind. You say, okay, well, that story adds up. Of course, 100 cops are going to show up. They think there's a mass shooting in a mall because there's fireworks popping off. That makes sense. But what doesn't make sense, because they're saying that this is actually the Nephilim, because there's eyewitness testimony from several people, and I've seen a lot of them. Of course, there's probably lots of hoaxers just trying to get views on TikTok, but some of them are really believable. I saw a graffiti artist talking about how his experience on the second floor, he saw these kids playing with a device, and these kids were wearing glasses that were really weird, and it basically, he describes what looked like they opened up a portal. Then other eyewitnesses say they saw these giant shadow alien creatures of sorts. And could it be? Sure. I don't know.
And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in Florida. Weird shit happens out there all the time. All the stories are out in Florida.
100% it is.
Okay, guys, there's just so much more to talk about. So we're going to stop right here, but make sure to join us on our next episode as we go a little further into the rabbit hole and discuss Hollywood conspiracies like Epstein Island, Disney satanic symbolism, and so much more. Be sure to click subscribe so you're going to be notified when part 2 with Isaac Weishaupt is available. So until next time, keep your eyes, ears, and minds open.
Thank you for listening to Harnessing Your Wealth with Billy Peterson. Before we declare the race official, please click the follow button so you can be notified when new episodes become available. For more information about today's show, please check out the show notes. Visit our website at www.petersonws.com or give us a call at 801-475-4002. Once again, thank you for listening. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Peterson Wealth Services. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.